She's from another neighborhood, very similar to this one, just across the valley, which is about the same.
And it says it down here, Rami, at the end of Ordinary Street.
Exactly, that's the name of the postcard. And what I'm trying to say, this neighborhood changed slowly and gradually during the years. That's why it's called the end of an ordinary street. Until the past just couple of years, my grandfather's house was down the steps, and I felt when my aunt became very sick and she left it, this was the house of reservoir of a lot of memories. And we used to play here. This is an empty plot, which used to house the house of the very former Prime Minister of Community 5, which is a derelict area that kind of like served as a mystery playground for us as kids when we were young. And I remember, the trips we used to have between my cousins and, going to the baker, to the shoemaker, and to the barber, and to the tailor, and all of these people. And all of a sudden, a lot of people just this year have left because of future development. So that's why this is called the end of an ordinary street. I'm not saying that the past has to kind of like be resurrected. What's gone is bygone and will never come back. But what I'm trying to say is that future development at least should care a little bit about memory, because memory and nostalgia is not something that to actually shun away from or to be ashamed of. It's a very natural feeling. And to think a little bit about the memory of the residents and the memory of the people within this neighborhood. Basically, that's the message that this is bringing. The stamps is a seal of authenticity, and the steps is basically a physical and also metaphorical stitching of the city together. Some of the postcards, not all of them, some of them are located on steps like what we have seen, but it's basically, it's encouraging the people to visit these non-places, because all of these places that the postcards are located in are not famous places, more or less. They're non-places in a sense where they're not usually featured, for example, on a touristic postcards or even on a billboard for the Ministry of Tourism or whatever. So the idea is actually by locating these postcards in these 12 locations, we are stitching the city together by encouraging people to come and visit these different spaces. But also it's a social stitching, which is not understood very well, encouraging people from different parts of the city to expand their circulation of engagement. So they are not just basically engaging in just their school, the shopping mall, and so on. It goes beyond that. I call it markers in the landscape, and the idea is that when the city first emerged, we didn't have that much as a thick urban fabric, as much these individual monuments in the landscape. And they were very utilitarian monuments. The community was very humble and functional and utilitarian. So you had, for example, the hangar of the electricity, further down there, the generator for water, the hospitals, the Italian hospital, municipality, churches, the water towers, schools, different schools, the palace, and so on. So it's this idea of markers in the landscape that I want to promote. And also to promote another thing, because a lot of this era is characterized by social housing and also housing for just the general public, middle class, professionals, and so on, as opposed to the messages of today, which are predominantly very elite gated communities or exclusive office towers and so on. So it's a message from the 60s and 70s and from the inception of the early city sent to the developers of today, that their agendas have to be rethought again, and to think again of a social agenda that is actually not completely social in a sense of for it being free as much as it is an interaction with the community and with the locals. And also a place of a lot of very important buildings for the city, such as the electricity hangar, which was built in the 30s to generate electricity for the city. My office has currently a project there where we are adapting the hangar into contemporary uses and building a building next to it which will serve as a gallery, because there's a lack of gallery space in the city. but what's important are the messages in the postcard. There are two messages that are being sent. One is the city entering modernity, which is very important, and the everyday stories of the city, the story of electrification of the city, and how it was started, and how basically it was families, individuals, who bought generators at their own expense, and they've actually lit the streets of the city. And then the hangar itself and the other generators were bought by individual families, such as Abu Ghanime, Talhouni, Qattan, and many, many others. This tells about a special relationship between the city and the elite families, basically. Because the state was not a very rich and resourceful state at the beginning. But in addition to the story of modernity, the site talks about resistance as well. And that's a very important narrative in the site. In the early 20s, for the first Legislative Council, an offer was made to the first Legislative Council when Jordan was under the mandate period by a Zionist who's actually a Palestinian Jew called Binhas Rothenberg. And Rothenberg made an offer to generate electricity in Jordan, hydropower over Nahr al-Yarmouk, over the river Yarmouk, in return for land, basically in the northern parts of the country. A lot of the history of Jordan is actually untold, basically. And certain members of the first Legislative Council, such as Shamsuddin Sami, Abu Sha'ar, and many others, contested this Rothenberg concession, and it was stopped. And there were riots in the cities of Irbid and also in the cities of Amman and Salt against the Rothenberg concession. And then the project was put on the shelves and never implemented, thank God. And it was actually local initiatives that eventually generated electricity in the city. Now we're going to Abu Darwish, the mosque. And the postcard in Abu Darwish ridicules and makes fun of social corporate philanthropy, with all due respect, because it's from, as we say in Arabic, من طرف الجابة, يعني basically. This is a project that was built in the late 80s by Mahmoud Sharkas, I think his name, we'll get there and we'll know. In 1987, and it costed him around 100,000 JDs at that time. It was a mosque, a school, and a library. And the postcard is a tribute to this person, and also a lesson to the corporates who claim corporate social responsibility. So that's the next topic.